The ocean does not remember names. It remembers only weight. The weight of steel. The weight of silence. The weight of stories that slipped beneath its surface and never came back. And somewhere, far below the calm skin of the sea, lies the memory of a single moment. A moment when a submarine, small and hidden in the dark, struck a mighty aircraft carrier built to rule the waves. It is a story of courage and fear, of decisions made in tight metal rooms, and of a strange kind of destiny that follows men and machines into the deep. This is a story of a submarine that sank a carrier, but could not escape its own fate. Imagine the sea on a quiet morning. The surface looks peaceful, almost innocent. But beneath that surface the world changes. Sunlight fades into green, then blue, then black. Pressure rises. Sound bends. What seems empty becomes a maze of currents and shadows. A submarine moves through that darkness like a ghost. No footsteps. No engines heard above. Only the soft hum of machines and the slow heartbeat of men who know they are deep inside another world. Inside such a submarine the air is warm and smells of oil and metal. Every sound matters. A drop tool. A sudden hiss. Even breathing too loudly feels dangerous. The crew sleeps in narrow bunks, eats in small metal rooms, and walks carefully through tight passages. They know each other's habits, fears, and voices. They know that every decision here is shared. Every danger is shared. Every outcome is shared. On the surface, things are very different. An aircraft carrier lives in the sunlight. It rises from the sea like a small city. Its deck stretches for hundreds of meters. Its engines shake the water around it. Planes roar into the sky. Crews march on open decks. Radios buzz with orders. The ship does not hide. It announces itself with power. But in the strange logic of war, it is often the quietest machine that becomes the most dangerous. As we begin this journey, picture two giants of the sea. One built for strength. One built for silence. Their meeting was not an accident. It was part of a much larger world. A world shaped by fear, ambition, and the belief that victory belongs to those who strike first. Perhaps this is where it all began, not in the explosion that tore through steel, but in the choices made long before. Choices made by nations, by generals, by sailors, by the deep ocean itself, which seems to decide who survives and who is forgotten. Years before the attack, the world's oceans had already become battlefields. Countries raced to build stronger navies, faster ships, and smarter machines. Submarines became symbols of unseen danger. Carriers became symbols of force and reach. The ocean did not care. It simply held them all, moving them like pieces on a giant blue board. The submarine in our story began its life in a shipyard where sparks flew from metal and workers hammered steel plates into shape. It was born from fear. Fear of the enemy, fear of being outmatched, fear of losing control of the sea. Engineers designed it to slip through darkness without being found. They gave it torpedoes that could break open even the thickest hull. They trained its crew to be calm under pressure, fast under fear, and deadly when the moment came. But destiny does not always follow design. When the submarine first touched water, the ocean welcomed it the way it welcomes everything, without emotion. The crew stepped aboard with mixed feelings. Pride, worry, curiosity. Some had never seen the open sea before. Others had spent their whole lives on ships. But all of them understood one thing. Once the submarine dove below the surface, there would be no turning back. Not quickly. Not easily. Not safely. Far away, the aircraft carrier lived a different life. It was built not to hide but to be seen. Its decks were always busy, mechanics tightening bolts, pilots sharpening their skills, officers studying maps and weather charts. The carrier carried hundreds of lives. Each person on board had a job that connected to someone else. Together, they formed a giant machine of human movement and metal parts. On the day the two vessels began drifting toward each other's fate, the sea looked harmless. Gentle waves rolled under a pale sky. Clouds drifted slowly. Wind whispered across the water. But beneath that calm surface, the submarine moved with purpose. Its captain watched the sonar screen, listening for echoes. His mind worked like a puzzle, calculating distance, speed, and silence. He knew the carrier was somewhere ahead. He did not know exactly where. But he knew it was coming. A carrier that powerful never travels alone. It is always surrounded by other ships, destroyers, cruisers, supply vessels. A floating fortress with eyes in every direction. To get close enough to attack such a group was almost impossible. Almost. Inside the carrier, life went on as usual. Pilots checked their gear. Sailors cleaned the deck. Officers discussed routes and dangers. No one expected a submarine to be waiting in the shadows. No one expected the ocean to hide an enemy so close. Sometimes destiny moves quietly. The deeper the submarine traveled, the colder the water became. The hull groaned softly under pressure. Lights flickered. Men whispered. Time seemed to slow down. Far above, ships cut through the waves without knowing they were being watched from below. The submarine's captain ordered his crew to lower speed. Every sound became brighter in the ears. Every vibration mattered. They listened for the carrier's heartbeat, the deep, powerful thrum of engines that could be detected through water long before the ship could be seen. Then one day they heard it. A faint vibration at first. A long, slow rhythm. A sign that something massive was moving across the sea. The crew fell silent. Eyes sharpened. Hands steadied. They knew that this was it, the beginning of the moment they had trained for. The moment that had brought them far from home and deep into danger. Above them, the carrier continued forward, unaware. Its engines pushed water aside. Its radar scanned the sky, not the sea. Its crew trusted the escort ships to protect them. The captain believed the ocean ahead was empty. He did not know the ocean was already occupied. In this part of the sea, currents twisted like rivers under the surface. The submarine moved slowly, fighting the push and pull of the deep. The captain studied his maps. The carrier's escort ships sent out steady pings, active sonar cutting through water like a searchlight. Each ping echoed inside the submarine like a distant hammer strike. Still they moved forward. Inside the submarine, the crew began preparing the torpedoes. Cold metal cylinders. Sharp fins. Guided by wires and purpose. The men worked quietly, knowing that any mistake, even a small one, could cost all of them their lives. Outside, in the dark water, the world felt tight and endless at the same time. Light did not reach here. Sound traveled fast. Pressure grew with every meter. And yet, in this heavy silence, machines and men prepared for an attack that would change history. Perhaps no one truly wanted this moment. Not the submarine crew. Not the carrier crew. Not the ocean itself. But war rarely asks what people want. It asks only what they will do. Somewhere deep inside the submarine, fear lived quietly in every man. But courage lived beside it. That is how men survive in places where sunlight cannot reach. And now the two vessels, one giant, one unseen, drifted toward the point where their paths could not separate. Some stories begin with noise. This one begins with silence. A silence that waited. A silence that watched. A silence that would soon break open. The ocean has its own way of carrying stories. It does not rush. It does not shout. It moves slowly like a giant creature breathing in and out over thousands of years. As the submarine followed the carrier's trail through deep waters, it felt as if the sea itself was watching with quiet interest. Every ripple mattered. Every echo mattered. The crew could sense it. The men did not speak much, but their eyes carried the same question. Would they reach the carrier? Or would the ocean claim them first? Life inside the submarine was different from anything on land. The corridors were so narrow that two men could barely pass each other. The metal walls were cold to the touch. Pipes vibrated softly, carrying air from room to room. The engine hummed with a low, steady beat. And the smell, a mix of diesel, metal, sweat, and old food, became something the crew stopped noticing after days underwater. Some of the younger sailors had joined the Navy with dreams of adventure. Stories of bravery. Stories of victory. But inside the submarine, reality was different. Adventure was replaced by routine. Victory was replaced by patience. And bravery was replaced by calm silence. Every day felt long. Every hour felt the same. But every minute mattered. They listened for danger. They listened for life. And now they listened for the carrier. Far above them, the world was open and loud. The carrier pushed through the waves like a giant steel mountain. Its deck shone under sunlight. Wind rushed over it with endless speed. Aircraft were lined up like metal birds waiting for orders. Crew members worked in busy lines, refueling planes, checking engines, watching the horizon. A carrier is a city in motion, fast, powerful, and full of life. The men on board walked on open decks, breathed fresh air, saw the sky every hour of the day. They could feel the sun. They could hear the sea. They could look out at the world around them and know where they were. The submarine crew could not. For them, the sea was not a view. It was a ceiling, a wall. A constant reminder that they lived inside a fragile tube of metal pushed deeper than humans were meant to go. They did not see the waves. They did not feel the wind. They did not know if the sky above was clear or stormy. All they knew was darkness and depth. Still, they followed their mission. The captain spent hours staring at sonar readings, studying tiny dots and faint echoes. His face rarely changed. He spoke softly, choosing his words carefully. The men respected him because he never raised his voice, even when danger closed in. Calm was his power. It was what kept the submarine steady. Once, during a quiet moment, a young sailor whispered to another, "How deep are we now?" The older sailor answered, "Deep enough to feel it in your bones." The young sailor nodded, pretending to understand. But truthfully, no one fully understood the deep until they heard the hull creak like an old tree bending under a storm. That sound reminded them that the ocean was not empty. It pressed against them every second. And yet they went deeper. The carrier did not know it was being hunted. On board, officers checked weather maps, tracking wind speeds and cloud cover. Pilots chatted about upcoming missions. Mechanics fixed small engine issues. Chaplains prayed with those who asked. The ship had a rhythm of work, duty, and trust. Many believed the ocean beneath them was safe. They trusted the escort ships. They trusted the radar systems. They trusted the waves. They did not know something small and silent was watching from below. In war, trust can be dangerous. The submarine crept forward, using underwater ridges and strong currents to hide its movement. Sometimes, the captain ordered the engines to be turned down so low that the submarine barely moved. Silence was their armor. A few times, the escort ships passed close enough that the crew could hear faint vibrations echoing through the water. These moments were the hardest. The men froze. They held their breath. A dropped wrench, a loud cough, even a loose plate shaking could give away their position. But the submarine stayed hidden. On one long night, when the sea above was calm and the water around them felt thick with pressure, the captain finally heard what he had been waiting for, the deep, unmistakable heartbeat of the carrier's engines. He leaned closer to the sonar operator. "There," the operator whispered. "Bearing 076. Strong signal. Big ship." The captain closed his eyes for a moment. He knew. The time was coming. The sea outside was calm, but inside the submarine, tension tightened like a rope. The men spoke in short sentences. Their faces became sharper, more focused. Every sound was checked. Every instrument was rechecked. No one wanted to make a mistake. Above them, the carrier's crew enjoyed an ordinary evening. Some played cards. Some cleaned weapons. Some wrote letters home. Others stared at the sunset, watching the sky turn orange and gold. They felt safe. They felt powerful. They had no reason to look down into the dark world beneath them. Destiny often arrives quietly. Hours passed. The submarine moved into a new position, guided by maps, instinct, and the captain's steady voice. At one point, the captain ordered the lights dimmed, creating a soft red glow inside the submarine. Red lights helped the crew's eyes stay sharp. They also made the world look almost unreal, like a dream balanced between fear and calm. The torpedo room filled with careful movement. Men loaded the metal cylinders into firing tubes. They checked the wires and valves. They sealed the hatches. The room felt heavier with every step. A single mistake here could destroy the submarine before it even attacked. The chief torpedo man looked at his crew. "Do it slow. Do it right." They listened. High above, the carrier's engines continued beating their slow, steady rhythm across the sea. If someone on board had placed their ear against the hull, perhaps they might have heard the faint whisper of danger moving below. But no one did. No one thought to. The ocean kept its secrets. Early the next morning the sky grew pale. Wind brushed across the carrier's deck. Sailors prepared for another day of operations. Some stretched. Some yawned. Some shared jokes. To them it was just another day at sea. To the submarine, it was the moment they had been waiting for. The captain gave quiet orders. The submarine rose slightly, just enough to bring the periscope near the surface. The metal tube slid upward through the water. Drops ran down its cold sides. Through the lens, the captain saw the world above for the first time in days. Light. Waves. And then, a shape. Long, wide. Tall. A shadow of steel moving with slow confidence. The aircraft carrier. For a moment, the captain simply watched. The sheer size of the ship was overwhelming. It looked like a giant drifting across the sea, almost too large to believe. It carried hundreds of lives. It carried stories. It carried the hope of its fleet. But for the submarine, this was not a moment of awe. It was a moment of decision. The captain lowered the periscope. The crew waited for his words. The room felt smaller now, as if the ocean itself were pressing inward. He spoke quietly. We fire. No one cheered. No one smiled. In a submarine, the weight of such an order was heavy. The men moved to their stations. Fingers hovered over controls. The torpedoes sat ready in their tubes, cold and silent. Outside, the sea held its breath. Perhaps this was what destiny looks like. Not loud, not bright, but quiet and inevitable, like a tide that cannot be stopped. Inside that metal tube beneath the waves, men prepared to change history with a single command. The ocean waited. The carrier moved. And the submarine began to aim. Inside the submarine, the air felt heavier than before. No one said it out loud, but everyone knew the moment had arrived. The captain stood near the control panel, his face calm, his voice steady. The crew trusted him. They trusted each other. But still, fear hid quietly in the corners of the room. Torpedoes are strange things. They look simple from the outside, metal tubes with fins. But inside they carry power strong enough to split steel like paper. The men who handled them understood this well. They had trained for months, learning every bolt, every switch, every sound a torpedo could make. And now, for the first time, they would fire them in real war. The captain spoke softly. Prepare tubes 1 and 2. The torpedo room came alive. Metal locks clicked. Valves opened. Pressure hissed through pipes. The room smelled of oil and cold metal. The men moved with slow, careful steps. Each movement was controlled. Each breath shallow. Because they knew that once the torpedoes left the submarine, there would be no turning back. Above them, the carrier continued its steady journey across the ocean. Its crew had no idea that in the dark world below, someone was preparing to attack them. Sailors laughed on the deck. Officers looked through binoculars at the horizon. Mechanics checked engines. Pilots talked about the weather. Life felt normal. Calm. Safe. But destiny was already moving beneath them. The captain raised the periscope again. He looked carefully at the massive ship through the narrow lens. The carrier looked close now, too close for comfort. The sunlight reflected on its deck. Aircraft sat like sleeping beasts. Water foamed around its bow. The captain lowered the periscope. The crew waited. He gave the final order. Fire. The sound inside the submarine was not loud. It was more like a heavy thump, the sound of a torpedo being pushed out into the cold water. Then another. 2 torpedoes sped forward, guided by wires that stretched back to the submarine like thin threads. The men watched the instruments, tracking their movement. The water swallowed the torpedoes quickly. They disappeared into the dark, leaving behind trails of bubbles. Inside those metal cylinders was enough explosive force to tear open the hull of a giant ship. The captain whispered, "Hold steady." Every man froze. In the silence they waited. 10 seconds. 20. 30. The submarine moved slowly, adjusting its position. The sonar operator pressed the headphones tight against his ears. He listened for the sound they all feared and hoped for at the same time. Then it came. A dull, deep sound. A vibration through the water. A soft rumble that grew stronger. A hit. The first torpedo struck the carrier near its side. The explosion ripped through steel. Fire burst outward. The shockwave shook the water for meters around. Inside the submarine, the crew felt the vibration travel through the hull. Another second passed. The second torpedo hit. This time the explosion was even louder. A roar underwater. A force that tore through compartments and machinery. The carrier's hull split open. Flames shot upward. Water rushed inside. Men were thrown off their feet. Alarms screamed. Above, the calm ocean suddenly burst into chaos. The carrier shuddered violently. Smoke rose from its side. Sailors ran across the deck, shouting orders, trying to understand what had happened. Many had never heard such a sound before. A few thought a plane had crashed. Others thought a bomb had gone off. But soon they realized the truth: they were under attack. Inside the submarine, no one celebrated. The men stayed silent, listening to the sonar. The captain ordered the submarine to dive deeper. They needed to escape before the escort ships reacted. But the ocean had already changed. Destroyers and cruisers around the carrier began to speed up. Their engines roared through the water. Radars turned. Orders flew across radios. The sea above the submarine was no longer quiet. It was full of angry movement. To the submarine crew, the sounds felt like thunder rolling across the sky. The captain gave quick commands. Down 30 meters. Slow speed. Quiet running. The submarine sank deeper. Its hull creaked. The water around it grew colder. Pressure tightened. But they had no choice. The deeper they went, the safer they would be. For a moment it seemed like they might escape. But war does not end so quickly. Above them, the carrier fought to stay alive. Water flooded through broken compartments. Machinery sparked. Officers shouted for damage control teams. Sailors carried wounded men across smoke-filled hallways. The deck tilted slightly as the ship took on water. The sea around the carrier turned dark with oil. The sound of metal twisting echoed through the hull. Some sailors jumped into the water, fearing the ship would explode. Others stayed, trying to close watertight doors and slow the flooding. Their faces were covered in soot. Their hands shook. But still they fought. Below the surface, the submarine slipped through the dark like a wounded animal. The captain ordered the engines to near silence. The crew spoke only in whispers. Some held onto rails as the submarine tilted slightly while descending. Then came the first reply from the escort ships. A series of deep underwater explosions, depth charges, shook the sea. The first explosion boomed far away. A low, heavy sound. The second was closer. The third rattled the submarine's lights. Dust fell from the ceiling. The hull groaned like an old ship in a storm. The captain gripped the edge of the control panel. His voice remained calm. Hold steady. No sudden moves. The crew followed his orders perfectly. They checked gauges. They monitored oxygen levels. They controlled the engines with slow, careful turns. Above them, destroyers dropped more depth charges. The sea thundered with violent shocks. The submarine shook. Men grabbed whatever they could to keep from falling. One of the younger sailors whispered a prayer under his breath. The sonar operator listened, sweat running down his face. More charges, closer. Another explosion. The lights flickered again. The ocean felt angry now. But the submarine kept moving, trying to slip away into deeper water. The captain chose a risky path, a narrow underwater valley where sonar might not reach them. It was dangerous. One wrong turn could crash the submarine into a rock wall. But staying in open water was certain death. Above them, the carrier continued to sink slowly. Smoke covered its deck. Rescue boats rushed toward it. Sailors jumped into the water, calling for help. Helicopters prepared to lift the wounded. The sea that had carried the carrier with pride now pulled it downward with cold indifference. Water flooded its lowest decks. The ship tilted more. And in the distance, the submarine fought the ocean, fighting to escape the destiny it had created. Inside the submarine, the silence after each explosion felt worse than the explosion itself. It made them wonder if they were safe, or if another charge was already on the way. For a moment, the sea grew quiet. Too quiet. Then, boom. A depth charge exploded so close that the submarine tilted sharply. A metal panel came loose. A bulb shattered. Someone cried out in pain as he hit the floor. Water sprayed from a pipe before the crew sealed it. The captain steadied himself. Hold on. Hold on. Take us deeper. The submarine slid downward, deeper into the cold dark. Pressure increased. The hull creaked again. But they continued. We just need a little more distance, the captain whispered. Above them, the carrier made its final sounds, long metallic groans as its great weight shifted. Some sailors watched from lifeboats. Others from rescue ships. They saw the giant ship lean slowly to one side, then disappear beneath rising waves. The sea swallowed it whole. A city of steel gone in minutes. And somewhere below, the submarine that struck it continued to run, hoping the ocean would let it escape. But destiny had not finished with them yet. The ocean had gone quiet again, but it was not the calm kind of quiet. It was the heavy kind, the kind that makes men hold their breath without meaning to. Inside the submarine, the crew waited for the next explosion, the next sound, the next hint of danger. But for a moment, nothing happened. Nothing, except the slow beat of the submarine's engines as it slipped deeper into the dark. The captain stood still, listening to the silence as carefully as he had listened to the noise. Sometimes silence was good. Sometimes silence meant the enemy was preparing something worse. He touched the metal wall beside him. It vibrated gently, a reminder of the pressure outside, pushing harder with every meter they descended. Level her out, he said softly. The depth gauge needle stopped climbing. The submarine steadied itself at a dangerous depth, a depth at which the hull groaned under the ocean's weight. The captain knew this. The crew knew it too. But they preferred the crushing dark over the explosions above. The sonar operator leaned close to his screen. I think they're searching shallower now, he whispered. The captain nodded. Good. Stay quiet. Inside the submarine, men finally began to breathe again. But their faces still looked pale, their hands still shook from the shock waves. One sailor sat against the wall, wiping sweat from his temples. Another checked the engines, making sure nothing had broken during the last blast. In the torpedo room, the chief torpedo man ran his hand across the empty tubes. They had fired their strongest weapons. Now all they had left was silence, their oldest weapon. The submarine glided through the cold water like a shadow. Slow. Careful. Almost invisible. The sea outside was pitch black now. Even the faintest sunlight could not reach this depth. Temperature dropped. The hull groaned softly, like old wood bending in the wind. Somewhere above them, the wreck of the aircraft carrier settled onto the ocean floor. Pieces drifted down like snow. Fuel leaked out in dark clouds. Life rafts floated on the surface far above. Sailors waited to be found. Rescuers worked desperately. Radio messages filled the air. But down here none of that mattered. The submarine had become a world of its own, a world of metal, fear, and quiet determination. One sailor finally spoke in a hushed voice. Did we do it? The captain answered simply. Yes. The words felt heavy. Not proud. Not victorious. Heavy. Because even though they had completed their mission, they all knew something important. Now the entire enemy fleet would be hunting them. Every ship in the area. Every plane. Every sonar system. Every depth charge. The ocean around them would not stay quiet for long. Hours passed slowly. The submarine moved through underwater canyons trying to use the terrain as cover. Sharp rocks rose beside them like jagged teeth. Deep trenches dropped into darkness that no human eyes had ever seen. Strange currents pushed against the submarine's hull. Fish scattered as it passed. The navigator studied the map with a frown. This area is tricky, he whispered. Narrow passages. Strong currents. The captain nodded. We stay low. We stay slow. For a while, everything seemed to go their way. The water grew calmer. The sonar picked up no signs of nearby ships. The crew's breathing became steadier. Some even allowed themselves to believe they might actually get away. Then late into the night something changed. A faint ping echoed through the water. Ping, ping, ping. The crew froze. Every muscle in every body tightened. They all knew that sound. Sonar. Enemy sonar. Destroyer, the sonar operator whispered, his voice tight. Close. Very close. The captain's eyes narrowed. Silent running. Everyone, stay still. The engine slowed to almost nothing. Fans turned off. Lights dimmed. Even speaking above a whisper felt dangerous now. Ping, ping. The sound grew stronger. The destroyer was scanning the deep. Inside the submarine, the men could hear their own heartbeats. The hull expanded and contracted slightly with pressure. A wrench vibrated gently on a shelf until a sailor reached up and stopped it with his hand. The destroyer passed above them, its propellers chopping through the water like a giant blade. The sound was loud, almost painful. The submarine crew held their breath as the shadow moved across them. Then, silence again. A sailor let out a slow exhale. Another whispered, "Did they see us?" The sonar operator shook his head. Not sure. But the captain knew the truth. They were too deep. Too close to underwater rock walls. If the destroyer had detected even a hint of them, it would have dropped charges already. Yet fate had a habit of changing quickly. Moments later, the sonar operator's eyes widened. Multiple contacts. More ships coming. The captain stepped closer. How many? The operator swallowed. 3, 4, maybe more. The captain felt a cold weight in his stomach. The enemy fleet was sweeping the area, searching every shadow, every trench, every canyon. "They're not giving up," he whispered. And why would they? A carrier had just been sunk. They would search every meter of ocean until they found the submarine responsible. The destroyers spread out. Their propellers thumped through the water. Their sonar beams scanned the deep. Ping after ping echoed around the submarine, bouncing off rocks, bouncing off the hull, bouncing off nothing at all. The submarine tried to hide in the underwater valley, drifting slowly, using the terrain as a shield. But the valley grew narrower. The walls closed in. It felt like the sea was squeezing them toward a place they could not escape. In the engine room, the chief engineer wiped his hands and whispered, "We can't stay at this depth much longer. The pressure's too much. The hull, it's starting to complain." They all heard it, soft groans and pops, like the sound of a ship settling in a storm. Metal under stress. The captain faced an impossible choice. Stay deep and risk being crushed by the ocean, or rise higher and risk being found by the destroyers. He whispered to himself, "We're trapped between the sea and the sky." He made his decision. "Take us up, slowly. 10 meters. The submarine rose slightly. The hull relaxed a little. But as they rose, the sonar pings grew sharper. Louder. Closer. Ping, ping, ping. The destroyers were closing in. A sailor near the front wiped tears from his eyes. He wasn't crying out of fear. He was crying because the pressure, the tension, the silence were too much for the human heart. The captain placed a hand on the metal wall again. It felt warmer now, from friction, from stress, from life inside. He closed his eyes. "Hold steady. Trust the sea," he said softly. Above them, the destroyers moved in a slow circle, their sonar beams painting the deep water in invisible light. Then suddenly, a new sound. A deeper ping. A stronger echo. A sonar lock. The destroyer had found something. The submarine crew looked at each other with wide eyes. The sonar operator whispered, "They've got us." There was no time to run. No time to dive. No time to hide. The captain braced himself. Prepare for charges. The first explosion hit the water moments later. Boom. The submarine shook violently. Men fell to their knees. Lights flickered. A pipe burst, spraying water. Boom. Another explosion. Closer. Harder. Louder. The chief shouted, "Hull's holding for now, but not for long." Boom. The submarine tilted sharply. Oxygen tanks rattled. A panel fell from the ceiling. Outside, the destroyers continued their attack, determined to crush the submarine before it could escape. Inside, water trickled down the walls. The temperature dropped. Fear rose. But still the men worked. Still they fought. Still they tried. Because even though they were surrounded by darkness, they refused to surrender. Yet deep inside the submarine, in places the crew could not see, cracks were beginning to form. Tiny cracks at first, almost invisible. But under the pressure of the deep, tiny cracks grow fast. And for the first time since the mission began, The captain felt something he had tried to hide. Not fear. A strange, quiet certainty. A feeling that the ocean had decided their fate long before they fired their first torpedo. Inside the submarine, the world no longer felt solid. Each explosion shook the floor like a giant hammer striking metal. The lights flickered in short, nervous pulses. Pipes rattled. Water dripped from joints that had never leaked before. The men could feel the submarine changing, not breaking yet, but bending under the weight of pressure and fear. Another depth charge exploded above them. Boom. Dust fell from the ceiling. A sailor lost his balance and fell onto a metal rail. He groaned as two others helped him up. But no one had time to rest. They had to keep the submarine alive. The captain looked around at his crew. Their faces were pale, their eyes wide. Yet there was something else in their expressions, a strange mixture of fear and loyalty. They would not abandon their posts, not even if the ocean tried to crush them. "Report," the captain said softly. The chief engineer's voice shook. "Minor flooding in the rear compartment. Pumps are working but the pressure's increasing." "Keep the pumps running," the captain replied. His voice remained steady, like a rock in a storm. The sonar operator raised his head slowly. "Destroyers are circling, getting closer again. I hear propellers on both sides." The captain nodded. The destroyers had formed a trap. They were tightening the circle, squeezing the submarine toward shallower water or deeper rocks. The men knew what that meant. No way forward. No way back. Only choices that led to danger. One sailor, barely 20 years old, whispered to the man beside him, "Do you think we'll make it back?" The older sailor forced a small smile. "We'll make it somewhere." The young man nodded, not fully understanding what that meant, but grateful for the comfort. In the narrow passage outside the control room, a medic checked on a few men who had been thrown around by earlier blasts. He wrapped bandages. Clean cuts. Whispered soft words. Inside a submarine, kindness was rare but powerful. A single gentle voice could make the entire room feel warmer. Another explosion roared above them. Boom. The hull rang like a bell. The metal groaned. A loud creaking sound echoed through the submarine, and every man froze. Creaking was a dangerous sound. It meant the submarine was bending. It meant the ocean was pushing harder. The chief engineer rushed to check the pressure gauges. "The hull can't take much more of this," he whispered. But he didn't say it loudly. He didn't want to scare the others. The captain heard him anyway. He placed a hand on the chief's shoulder. "Do your best. That's all any of us can do." The chief nodded, trying to hide how scared he truly was. The submarine moved deeper into the valley, hoping the rocks around them would confuse the sonar echoes. But the valley was growing tighter. The walls felt too close, like they were folding in. In the torpedo room, even though their weapons were gone, the crew stayed at their stations. They checked valves. They sealed hatches. They made sure nothing would break under pressure. It was their way of fighting back. One sailor touched the empty torpedo tube and whispered, "You did your job. Now we have to do ours." Above them, the destroyers began another attack run. The sonar operator pressed his headphones tightly. "Charges, incoming," he said. The captain took a deep breath and held onto the rail. Boom. The explosion hit so hard that the submarine's lights went dark for a moment. Total darkness. Men gasped. Someone whispered a prayer. Then the emergency lights flickered on, dim, red, eerie. The submarine looked like a floating heartbeat in the dark. Water sprayed from a broken pipe. Two sailors rushed to clamp it. Their hands shook, but they worked fast. They had practiced this drill many times. But practice never felt like this, not with the deep sea pressing on them, not with death circling above. The captain ordered the engines to slow even more. "We have to disappear," he said. "Let them think we're gone." The engines hummed softly. The submarine drifted through the valley like a wounded creature trying to hide from predators. But even as it moved, something inside the submarine changed. Something the crew did not notice right away. A small crack had formed in one of the forward ballast tanks. A tiny line. Barely visible. But the deep ocean pushed against it with incredible strength. Water began to seep through, drip by drip. In the control room, the navigator checked his instruments nervously. We're drifting toward the rock wall, he said. Current is stronger here. The captain looked at the map. Adjust 2 degrees starboard. Slowly. Slowly was the key. Anything more might make noise. Noise meant detection. Detection meant depth charges. Depth charges meant death. The submarine obeyed, turning slightly, scraping against the current, fighting the ocean inch by inch. Another ping echoed through the water. The sonar operator whispered, "They're still searching. They haven't given up." The captain closed his eyes. He knew it too. The enemy would stay on them until they were certain the submarine was destroyed. Hours passed. Silence returned in small pieces. The destroyers drifted farther away. Their sonar pings grew fainter. The explosions stopped. The crew felt the change. Someone whispered, "Maybe they lost us." Another whispered back, "Or maybe they're waiting." Hope and fear mixed together in the small metal room like smoke. The captain finally said, "We hold position here. No sound. No movement. We let the sea hide us." It was their only chance. The engines shut off completely. The submarine floated in the valley, motionless. It felt like time had stopped. Only the soft groaning of the hull reminded them they were still in danger. Minutes passed. Then hours. The crew grew quiet. Some closed their eyes, resting against the walls. Some prayed silently. Others stared into nothing, thinking of home, family, sunlight, open air, things they could not see down here. And the submarine continued to leak. The forward compartment filled slowly. Pumps fought the water, but the leak was growing. Not fast. Just steady enough to be dangerous. The engineer wiped sweat from his forehead. "If this keeps up, we'll lose buoyancy," he whispered to the captain. "How long?" the captain asked. "Maybe hours. Maybe less." The captain looked around the submarine, this metal tube that had carried them through darkness, fear, and silence. A machine built for survival, now fighting against its last breath. He whispered to himself, "We sank a carrier, and now the sea is sinking us." No one else heard him. But everyone felt the same truth. The ocean had given them the chance to strike. The ocean had helped them escape the destroyers. But the ocean was also the one thing they could not fight. Far above them, the waves moved quietly under the moonlight. Ships searched the area, scanning the surface. Helicopters flew low, their lights sweeping across the water. Rescue boats collected survivors from the sunken carrier. But none of them knew the submarine was trapped in a dark valley, slowly filling with water. The men inside listened to the soft sound of dripping. The sound grew louder in their minds. It felt like a countdown. A countdown to something none of them wanted to imagine. The captain finally spoke, his voice gentle and sad. "Whatever happens now, we face it together." The men nodded quietly. They were sailors. They were warriors. But now they were simply human beings, waiting in the dark, hoping the ocean would show mercy. But deep down, every man felt the same fear. The submarine had escaped destruction, but it might not escape destiny. The submarine floated in the valley like a silent shadow, hidden between tall underwater walls that rose on both sides like giant cliffs. The sea was calm around them, but it was not a peaceful calm. It felt like the moment before a storm, quiet, tense, waiting. Inside the submarine, the air felt thicker than before. It carried the smell of oil, sweat, and slow fear. The men sat or stood wherever they could, their bodies tired from hours of silence and shock. No one knew what time it was. Down here there was no sunrise, no sunset, only darkness. The captain stood near the depth gauge, watching the needle with steady eyes. The submarine was holding, but not for long. The leak in the forward ballast tank was growing. The pumps fought bravely, but the sea was stronger. Drop by drop, water crept into the submarine like an unseen enemy. The chief engineer approached the captain quietly. "The leak is worse," he said. "We can't stop it. We can only slow it." "How long do we have?" the captain asked. The chief hesitated. "Maybe 3 hours. Maybe less." The words hung in the air like a weight. 3 hours. 3 hours before the submarine became too heavy to hold itself up. 3 hours before gravity and the sea decided its fate. The captain nodded slowly. He did not show fear. He never did. But his eyes carried something deeper now, acceptance mixed with determination. "Keep the pumps running," he said. "We fight until the last moment." The engineer nodded and left. The captain walked through the narrow corridor, checking on his men. Some sat with their heads down. Some leaned against the walls, staring into the dim red light. Some whispered to each other about home, wives, mothers, brothers, children they hoped to see again. In the torpedo room, where the air felt colder, a sailor held a small photograph, a family picture creased from being carried in his pocket. He stared at it quietly, his thumb tracing the faces on it. In the control room, the navigator whispered to himself, repeating the names of cities he wanted to visit someday. Paris, London, Tokyo. He whispered the names like a prayer, as if saying them might keep him alive. The captain listened to all these small moments. They were the heartbeats of the submarine. Then suddenly the hull made a long, low groaning sound, a deep metal cry that silenced every man. The pressure outside was increasing. The submarine was sinking little by little, too slowly to notice minute by minute, but fast enough to feel every hour. The sonar operator lifted his headphones. "I don't hear any ships anymore," he whispered. "They must think we're dead." The men looked at each other. Relief? Maybe. But also something else. If the enemy ships had left, no rescue would come. No help. No chance. They were alone. The captain nodded. "We stay silent. We don't move. If they return, we must not be found." But even as he said it, he knew something the crew was slowly beginning to understand. It wasn't the enemy that would decide their fate now. It was the ocean. Hours passed in slow motion. The pumps hummed, pushing water away. The engines remained off, keeping the submarine silent. The men waited, listening for every groan of metal, every drop of water. But the sea kept pushing. The leak grew. Water pooled on the floor in the forward compartment. Men stepped through it carefully, their boots splashing softly. Every splash felt like a warning. At some point, the navigator whispered, "We're sinking, aren't we?" The chief engineer answered, not unkindly, slowly. But yes, slowly. The words felt like needles. The captain returned to the control room and spoke quietly, almost gently. "Listen to me." Every man turned to him. "We are fighting the sea, and we will keep fighting. But if the sea wins, we face it together. No panic. No fear. Only courage. Only respect." The men nodded. Some swallowed hard. Others blinked away tears. Courage was not loud here. Courage was quiet. Courage was holding your breath and doing your job when your hands were shaking. Minutes passed. Then an hour. The submarine tilted slightly. Just a few degrees, almost nothing. But the men felt it. The ship was growing heavier. The pumps continued to run, but their sound grew weaker. The engineer checked the pressure. His face tightened. The captain noticed. "How bad?" The engineer exhaled slowly. "We're losing the battle." "How long?" the captain asked. "Maybe an hour. Maybe less." The submarine groaned again, a long, deep sound like a tired giant stretching after too much weight. The men listened. Some closed their eyes. Some held onto nearby rails. Some whispered to themselves. The captain placed a hand on the wall. It felt cold. Wet in places. Breathing in places. He spoke softly under his breath. "Come on, girl. Hold on." But the submarine had already given its all. Another groan. Louder this time. A ceiling light flickered. A sharp crack echoed from the forward compartment. A sailor shouted from the front, "Water's coming in faster." The chief engineer rushed forward. "We'll try to seal it again." Men moved quickly, grabbing tools, holding equipment, trying to slow the sea. They pressed metal plates over the crack. They turned valves. They pushed with all their strength. But the water pushed harder. A small jet of water became a stream. A stream became a spray. A spray became a pour. The engineer shouted, "Fall back. Close the hatch." The men ran back into the corridor as the forward room began to fill with water. The engineer slammed the hatch shut and locked it. The sound of water pounding against the door filled the submarine. The captain touched the engineer's shoulder. "You did the right thing." The engineer nodded, breathing heavily. I'm sorry, we tried. I know, the captain whispered. The submarine tilted again. This time more sharply. The floor angled. Tools rolled. A cup fell and shattered. The depth gauge needle moved slowly upward, not because the submarine was rising but because it was sinking deeper. Men grabbed rails to keep from sliding. The captain steadied himself. His voice remained calm even as the world tilted. Everyone, hold on. We will stay together. The lights flickered again. The hull groaned. The sea pushed harder. In the silence between groans, a young sailor whispered, Is this it? The older sailor beside him placed a hand on his shoulder. No one really knows. Not even the ocean. The submarine continued sinking. Slow, steady, inevitable. Some men cried quietly. Some whispered prayers. Some stayed silent, staring straight ahead with wide, calm eyes. The captain stood still, gripping the rail, watching the depth gauge. Outside, the ocean grew darker, colder, heavier. The submarine, once a hunter, was now prey to the one thing no ship could ever defeat, the deep. The captain looked around at his men and whispered in a voice filled with emotion, You did your duty. All of you. The submarine sank deeper. The pumps failed. The hull groaned louder. The lights dimmed. And the deep sea opened its arms. They had escaped the destroyers. They had escaped the enemy. But destiny had followed them. And now, deep below the surface, far from sunlight and sound, the sea prepared to claim its final story. The submarine tilted at a sharper angle now. Not enough to fall, but enough for every man to feel the slow slide of gravity pulling him toward the bow. The metal floor seemed to breathe under their feet, bending slightly with every groan of the hull. The air tasted heavy, damp, almost still. The captain closed his eyes for a moment. He was not thinking of victory or defeat. He was thinking of his men. The men who had followed him into the dark. The men who had trusted him. The men who were now looking at him with quiet, painful hope. The kind of hope that knows the odds but refuses to give up. He opened his eyes again. Prepare for deeper descent, he said softly. No one argued. No one panicked. They simply steadied themselves, ready for what was coming. The submarine sank slowly through the water. The depth gauge needle climbed in small, steady steps. Every few meters, the hull groaned like an animal under great weight. A few bolts squealed. Rivets shook. The entire vessel seemed to speak in long, tired breaths. In the rear compartment, where the engines sat silent and cold, a mechanic ran his hand along the side of the metal. Hold together, he whispered. Just a little longer. In the torpedo room, the youngest sailor wiped tears from his face. He wasn't ashamed. No one was judging him. Fear had become part of the air, something shared like oxygen. One of the older sailors sat beside him. Look, he said gently, nobody comes to the sea expecting to live forever. But we lived with honor. That matters. The young sailor nodded. Somewhere in the control room, someone asked softly, Do you think anyone will ever find us? Another whispered, Maybe not. The ocean heard them. But it said nothing. The submarine continued its slow descent. Water pressed harder against the hull. Tons of pressure from every side. Pressure that no living creature could survive. Pressure that only steel could endure, and even steel had limits. Then it happened. A sharp, echoing crack. The sound tore through the submarine like lightning. The men froze. The captain's hand shot out and gripped the metal rail. Another crack. Louder. Deeper. The hull was starting to give in. The engineer raced to the control room. His face was pale. Sir. The forward compartments are fully flooded. The walls are bending. We can't hold this depth. The captain nodded. He had known this moment was coming. How long? He asked quietly. The engineer swallowed. Minutes? Maybe. Silence. Deep, heavy silence. The captain looked at his men, tired faces, scared faces, brave faces. Faces of people who had given everything they had to the mission and to each other. He spoke softly. Listen to me. What happens next, none of you are to blame. You did your duty. You gave your best. And no one can ask for more. Some men lowered their heads. Others stared forward. A few whispered prayers. A few whispered names of people they loved. The submarine tilted again. A metal beam bent with a loud screech. Water dripped faster from the ceiling. The captain continued in a calm voice, "We stay together. We stay strong. We stay human." His voice cracked slightly on the last word. The depth gauge needle climbed higher. Too high. Far beyond safety. Then suddenly, bang. A panel burst open in the forward passage. A rush of icy water shot through the opening like a fist. It hit the wall with violent force. Men stumbled backward. The engineer shouted, "Seal the hatch. Seal it now." Two sailors pushed the heavy hatch shut, their boots sliding on the wet floor. The metal door slammed closed. The locking wheel spun. But the water kept pushing from the other side. Boom. Another section of the hull buckled inward. A deep, metallic thud echoed through the submarine like a heartbeat gone wrong. The captain looked at the gauge. Too deep. Far too deep. He whispered, "We can't rise. We can't hold. The sea has us." The men understood. They didn't need words. The submarine shook again. A loud groan spread across the hull. Rivets popped out one by one, small silver stars disappearing into the dark water. And then there was a moment, one quiet second, when everything stopped. No groaning. No cracking. No explosions. No sound at all. Just a stillness so deep it felt like time had paused. The men looked around, confused. They wondered if this silence meant hope or the end. Then came the final sound. It was not loud. It was not violent. It was final. A deep, powerful bending of steel. A long, rising whistle of pressure. A sudden rush of air. And a roar of water. The hull gave way. In the forward compartment, steel plates folded inward. Water crushed through the submarine in a violent burst. The lights went out. Darkness covered everything. In that last moment, the captain opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came. His lips formed one silent word. Together. Water filled the submarine in seconds. The deep sea swallowed voices, swallowed air, swallowed fear. And just like that, the submarine disappeared into the dark. No flames. No smoke. No wreckage on the surface. Only the cold, endless ocean holding the men and the machine as it carried them downward, deeper and deeper, until the pressure crushed every sound and every movement. When the water finally settled, the submarine rested at the bottom of the valley, quiet, still, and untouched by light. A metal tomb in a world where no human footsteps would ever touch. Far above them, ships searched the surface. Radios hissed with confusion. Helicopters hovered. Rescue boats moved in circles. But no one knew. No one saw. No one heard the final cries of metal in the dark. The men had not failed. They had completed their mission. They had fought with courage. They had held together until the end. But destiny had followed them into the deep, the same deep that had hidden them, protected them, and finally claimed them. The ocean closed over them like a blanket, leaving only a calm surface. A surface that betrayed nothing. A surface that looked like peace. When the submarine fell silent on the ocean floor, the sea returned to its natural rhythm. Currents drifted past the wreck. Small particles floated through the water like snow in a slow, endless winter. The deep world accepted the submarine the way it accepted everything, without judgment, without anger, without joy. Just silence. Just darkness. Just time. Up on the surface, things were very different. The sinking of the aircraft carrier shook the Navy, the government, and every sailor who heard the news. The carrier was not just a ship. It was a symbol of power, a floating fortress, a message to the world. For such a massive vessel to be brought down by a silent submarine, that was something people struggled to believe. Rescue teams rushed to save survivors. Ships moved across the water, calling out names, pulling men from the waves, offering blankets, water, and hope. Helicopters circled above, searching for anyone still alive. The air was filled with the smell of fuel, smoke, and salt. Reporters wrote headlines. Leaders held meetings. Families waited for news. But one question kept rising, whispered quietly at first, then spoken more loudly. Where was the submarine? Some believed it had escaped. Some believed it had been destroyed. Some believed it had slipped through the cracks of the sea, like a ghost moving through shadows. The truth lay far beneath them, in a valley no sunlight had ever touched. Down where the submarine rested, the world was peaceful in its own strange way. No storms, no sound, no wars. Just cold water and slow drifting life. Tiny sea creatures swam through broken windows. Soft sand settled on the hull. The ocean did what it always does, it covered the past with layers of silence. The men inside were gone, but they were not forgotten. Days later, when the Navy realized the submarine had not returned, a quiet sadness spread across the fleet. These men were not just names on a list. They were friends. They were sons. They were fathers. They were sailors who had lived in a narrow tube of steel, laughed with each other, shared meals, whispered stories, and dreamed of home. Some people called them heroes. Some called them victims. Some said fate had been unkind. Some said fate had been fair. But the truth is simpler. They were men doing a job in a world that demanded impossible things from them. In the years that followed, many searched for the submarine. Underwater vehicles scanned deep trenches. Sonar teams mapped the sea floor. Historians studied the ship's last known position. But the ocean guarded its secret carefully. Sometimes, in deep waters, it is not the wreckage that gets lost. It is the story. But the story of this submarine did not disappear. It lived on, not in the official reports, not in textbooks, but in the quiet spaces where memory survives. A young sailor who survived the carrier years later said, "I didn't hate them. They were doing what they had to do. And we were doing what we had to do. That's war. That's life." Another naval officer wrote, "The submarine crew fought with the courage of men trapped between duty and the deep." A historian added, "They remind us that the sea is not a battlefield. It is a world. And we enter it only as guests." Decades passed. The ocean floor shifted. Sand covered more of the submarine. Strange fish swam through its corridors. Time moved slowly in the deep. But the human world above changed fast. New ships, new wars, new stories. Sometimes a sonar reading would show something unusual in the deep. A strange shape. A long shadow. A metallic outline. But every time a team tried to investigate, currents pushed them away, or the equipment malfunctioned, or the sea turned rough. Almost as if the ocean had decided, the story is mine. And maybe that is how it should be. Not all stories need clear endings. Some endings are better left quiet. As years turned into decades, the legend of the submarine grew. People whispered, "It sank a carrier," and then vanished. Others said, "The sea took it because destiny demanded balance." Some said, "Their courage is buried with them. A monument made of silence." But the truth, the real truth, lives not in legends but in the hearts of those who remember. The submarine was a machine. Yes. But the men inside it were not. They laughed. They feared. They hoped. They regretted. They cared. They were human, living in a place no human was meant to live. In the final days of the search, when the Navy quietly accepted the submarine's fate, a senior officer said something that stayed with many. "We lost a ship. But more than that, we lost voices. And we owe it to them to remember. Remember their calm under pressure. Remember their strength in quiet moments. Remember their choices, even when those choices led them into danger. Remember that they stood together until the end." And so we remember. Not in loud speeches. Not in monuments. Not in grand ceremonies. But in the gentle way the story moves through time, passed from sailor to sailor, father to son, friend to friend. A story of courage, destiny, and the deep ocean that became their final home. Sometimes, late at night, when the sea is calm and the stars reflect on the water, some sailors say they can feel the presence of the submarine far below them. As if the ship still moves quietly in the dark, watching the world it left behind. Maybe that is only imagination. Maybe it is a kind of comfort. But there is one truth we can all hold on to. The ocean never forgets. And neither do we. The submarine that sank a carrier but could not escape its own destiny continues to rest in the deep, not as a symbol of war, but as a reminder of the courage of ordinary men facing extraordinary forces. A reminder that the sea is vast, that life is fragile, that destiny is strange, And that silence is sometimes the greatest storyteller of all. As the waves roll across the open water, soft and endless, the world moves forward. New ships sail. New stories rise. But somewhere deep beneath them, untouched by time, lies a quiet world where a submarine sleeps forever. A world where metal and memory rest side by side. A world where bravery echoes through the dark. A world where the ocean keeps its final promise. To hold what falls into its arms. To protect what it claims. And to hide the stories too powerful for the surface. The sea remains calm now. But if you listen carefully, if you let your mind drift deep into the dark places where light never goes, you can almost hear it. The last breath of a submarine. The heartbeat of men who stood together. The whisper of destiny unfolding in the deep. The story ends here. In silence. In stillness. In the quiet arms of the ocean. Where the submarine remains. Forever.